Hello there, people. Welcome to another episode of Flight Chat, the listener feedback show for the Flight Cast. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me, and we're going to kick things off for this particular week with a bunch of emails from our good buddy John. He has sent quite a few in the last few weeks. We'll start off with this one that he sent on August 27th called An Epic Rant. Oh, he had a lot to say in this particular one, so let's begin. He says, "You know, Ray, I feel like something new needs to be said about tribalism. A moratorium, if you will," he says. "If people want to save this Flight Chat episode for every time you see what Ray perpetually sees and I occasionally see, go right ahead." All right, here we go. Bookmarked. He says, "Vindication is a natural human emotion. When we are disappointed or happy with how something we like or don't like continues to be celebrated or ripped apart by rotten people, it's a valid emotion. The thing with feeling vindicated, though, is it can be abused. Just like how the First Amendment can be abused. How we vindicate or seek validation for something can have a profound long-term effect of how we can go forward in society." All right, we're getting deep here. He says, "I know I already responded to this post, but when I saw the screenshot gatekeeper to the new Jimmy Olsen actor while dropping trow on the Snyderverse version, a new revelation hit me when seeing this. There are a lot more people out there that are immature than there are people who are mature, whether they know it or not." Well, that's definitely true with respect to social media, John, I agree. He says, "There is always a mature route to take something, but for whatever reason, our culture has felt the need to be irreverent to immaturity. So this person goes, this version of Jimmy Olsen will be far better than whatever excuse Snyder came up with. Okay, that is subjectively speaking a very immature thing to post," John says. "A better mature version would be, I didn't care for the Elseworld interpretation in BVS, theatrical or extended. So far, I am preferring this casting based on aesthetics alone." "Is this really hard?" John asks. "I know 10-year-olds that can have better reactions to these morons." Yes, I completely agree with that. And yes, I do see the difference in both of those statements. John says, "Also recently in an X post, I saw someone share a pic of Leto's Joker and Eisenberg's Luthor photo, saying, 'Can we all agree that these are the worst versions?' Reactions were mixed, of course. Some said it's not even ex-Luthor, it's his son. My take is that while they aren't my favorite interpretations, I respect the fact that they tried a completely new spin on both characters. I could say the very same thing with Marvel villains. I didn't care for the twist villains of iconic villains," he says. "I didn't care for Iron Man 3's twist, even if Shang-Chi kinda fixed it. I didn't care for the Taskmaster twist, that would be in Black Widow. I didn't care for Baron Zemo in Civil War, he was better in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But you know what? As much as I don't care for these takes, the principle applies to them as well. Filmmakers want to be respectful of the source material, but not everyone knows the lore of these characters, no matter how many people who are excessively on the internet want you to believe this. If the real Taskmaster shows up, I'm not going to go, this is what it should have been. I'm going to go, this is my preference. Will an ideal world where we can all be mature 100% of the time like Mormons, no disrespect towards Church of Latter-day Saints people? No, but we can try to make an effort." And so that's the end of John's first email, his epic rant. And I 1,000% agree. And, if people can't understand the difference in those statements, and this is why, it's always funny when people come at me, when I have something to say or when I, hide for everyone or I block people and they're like, "Oh, well, clearly you only tolerate people's opinions when they agree with you." No, don't be an asshole. You can disagree with me all you like. Don't be an asshole. Anthony disagrees with me. There are times that John disagrees with me. A number of you that listen to this show and have listened to any of my other shows on the Flightcast or even over at Squadcast Media, you have not agreed with everything that I've said. You don't agree with everything that I say. We have differing opinions on movies. Anthony hates The Rise of Skywalker. He does not like Tross, and he really doesn't like Age of Ultron. I enjoy both films. And we have differing opinions on those. We have differing opinions on many things, and yet I've never felt the need to block Anthony. I've never felt the need to mute him. I've never felt the need to hide anything that he posted. Same goes with John. So it has nothing to do with disagreement. It has everything to do with how you posture it. And yeah, if somebody says that they prefer Skylar Gisando's Jimmy Olsen based on aesthetics alone because of how he looks, because I haven't seen the performance yet, but if they say that they prefer that alone based on aesthetics compared to what Zack Snyder did in BVS, either version, then that's all they have to say. They don't have to say, "Oh my goodness, this is going to be so much better than whatever excuse Snyder came up." That snark is not necessary. And so many people these days believe that they're okay saying that. No, look, you can say whatever you want, but there are consequences to what you say. And if you're going to be a dick about it, then people are going to be a dick right back to you. So you can't say, oh, I'm allowed to say whatever I want without any consequences. Oh, that's bullshit. Nothing that you say is without consequences. Everything that I say has consequences, right? There are people that disagree with me. There are people, if I get snarky with someone, they can get snarky right back with me. That's all I have an issue with. Has nothing to do with whether or not you disagree. Has nothing to do with whether or not you have a difference of opinion. It's whether or not you're an asshole about it. And you can disagree all you like. Just don't be an asshole about it. It's not that difficult. If you don't like Trevor Slattery in Iron Man 3, if you don't like that Mandarin twist, and if you're with John and you feel that Shang-Chi kind of fixed it, even though I say it completely fixed it in that regard, that's your business. If you don't like the Taskmaster twist or Baron Zemo, like in Civil War, that's your business. But, being all assholery about it and saying, oh, this is a travesty and I can't believe that this is a polished turd and all that, that's where it goes too far. And I don't give a shit if it's how you feel. I mean, that's fine. You can feel however you want, but you're an asshole. You're absolutely an asshole if you have to take that particular tact. And if that bothers you, then don't be an asshole. Don't say it in an asshole manner. It's very simple. John does a really good job of breaking down exactly the difference between being maturely disagreeing about things and immaturely disagreeing about things. If you're going to immaturely disagree, then don't don't get all squirrely when it gets thrown back at you. If you can't dish it out, don't dish it out if you can't take it in that regard. Seriously. So, no, I 1000% agree with precisely all of the sentiments that John presents here in his epic rant about tribalism. Could not agree more with respect to that. And we see it all the time. No doubt about it. So a couple days after that, John sent an email called Questions for This Week, because he did have some questions to pose here. And he says, number 1, seriously, the Gunn cultist and the Snyder cultist are insufferable, he says. Yes, they are. All cultists are insufferable, to be honest with you. He says they repeat the same talking points over and over again. They have nothing new to say. I.e., Snyder is just pretentious Michael Bay, but Bay at least doesn't take himself too seriously. James Gunn is a pedo. All Snyder cares about is grimdark and murder in his films. All Gunn cares about is middle school jokes, etc. You forgot to add rape. They also say that about Snyder. Disgustingly so, they say that all Snyder cares about is grimdark murder and rape. It's so horrifically, morally disgusting how people insult him in that regard. But John says, I am rooting for the day that these two filmmakers reunite to make a DC film. It's like people forget they worked on the Dawn of the Dead together and are still friends. But what would they do? You know what? I got it. They should do Lobo together starring Jason Momoa, he says. That's perfect. Lobo is the one character in the DCU that encapsulates Snyder and Gunn's best sensibilities. He's basically Beetlejuice in space. I would have Snyder direct and Gunn write it. Do you think this could work, and do you think these cultists have memories like goldfish since they tend to repeat the same talking points perpetually? Yes and yes. I do think that could work. And I think that's a great idea to, dream of, and, who knows. Look, the possibilities of Zack Snyder coming back to DC to do a movie under James Gunn's DCU, it's there. Never say never, right? And look, he's coming back to Warner Brothers to do 300. He hates Walter Hamada. He's not a fan of that old regime, but that old regime's gone, right? And however we feel about David Zaslav, it's not like he would have to be dealing with him directly. He'll have to deal with James Gunn directly, and we know he and Gunn are friends. So the possibilities of Snyder coming back to do a DCU film with James Gunn are definitely there. I don't know if they're high or low, but they absolutely exist. It's a more than zero proposition in that regard, truthfully. So I would love to see it, and Lobo does seem like it'd be a great pairing for that in that regard. It just really depends on, 1, the success of the DCU, and 2, whether or not, Gunn decides, and if the whole idea works, right, if the DCU plan works in terms of having all these different filmmakers' voices and perspectives, really breathing life into this franchise in a different, more vibrant way than we've ever seen with even the MCU in that regard, then yeah, I could absolutely see a filmmaker like Zack Snyder coming back to be part of the DCU. And yeah, I'd love that. I would, because I'm definitely on the side of people that want to see Gunn and Snyder work together on a project just to see the cultist head explode. I want that. I absolutely want that. They'll have nothing to say. And all the press, all of them, the two of them complimenting each other, the two of them talking about this and that and working together, all the behind-the-scenes footage, and Gunn talking about how great Snyder is and Snyder talking about how great Gunn is. I want that. Oh yeah, I absolutely want that, most certainly, because it will destroy all of the talking points that the cultists have that are already bullshit in the first place. So I'm 100% there with you, John. This is one of the best ideas you've come up with. I am about that, no doubt. I wish it would happen. Let's see if we can will it into the universe, huh? So second question for John, and this question's for this week email. He says, lately I've been seeing you post a lot about the Acolyte. Yes, I was, for sure. Honestly, I haven't been paying much attention. My mind has been in other places. What exactly is the controversy? Also, perhaps Lucasfilm should take a break from making Star Wars TV. I can't keep up with all of these shows. Well, to be fair, John, there aren't that many in terms of, like, Star Wars TV shows. I mean, think about it. Okay, 2019, right? You got The Mandalorian, right? That's when The Mandalorian started, November of 2019. So we're talking months before the pandemic, right? Okay. Mandalorian, there's 3 seasons of that, right? There's 1 season of the Book of Boba Fett, which spun off from The Mandalorian, from Mandalorian Season 2 in particular. There's 1 season of Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Okay? And it's right there. There's 1 season, but there will be 2 seasons of Andor, because Season 2 is in production. We'll get it probably sometime next year, if I'm not mistaken. There's 1 season of Ahsoka, the Ahsoka Tano show, the live-action series starring Rosario Dawson, and that's kind of a spin-off from her appearance in Season 2 of The Mandalorian as well. And now we have this 1 season of The Acolyte. I believe that's it. I don't think I'm missing a live-action Star Wars TV series at this point. Now, we have Skeleton Crew coming up in December. We do. But I don't think it's too much. I really don't. I think we're good. You know, and it's certainly less volume than the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even on television in that regard. So I think we're cool as far as them making Star Wars TV. But to answer your question about the controversy, what it is, John, is that The Acolyte was review bombed by Nerd QAnon and Nerd MAGA early on because it's too brown and too diverse for them. And it's part of their whole great replacement theory where they think that white guys are being replaced in their favorite franchise. And this is all because The Acolyte had a black lead and Asian supporting characters and cast, and then you had Manny Jacinto as well. It was a very brown and female cast, exclusively almost, right? I mean, there were a couple of white guys in the show, but not very many. Certainly the minority in that regard, which we're not used to seeing even in Star Wars. And so they review bombed it. And, you know, all of the usual suspects in the Nerd QAnon, Nerd MAGA assholes that are part of the Star Wars community, you know, Star Wars Theory, Nerdrotic, all those assholes, right? They review bombed it and they absolutely tore it to shreds, and they kept trying to rationalize their bigotry and their hatred under these, you know, they were mad that Kiadamundi's birthday had been screwed up. You know, they come with all these nitpicky reasons, right? And so it gets review bombed. And then I want to say a week after the final episode of the show, final episode of the first season aired or you know, released on Disney Plus, was when we got this article from Deadline saying that it had been canceled, that there would be no season 2, right? And there hasn't been any official word from Disney, and that's where the controversy stems from, is this idea that there were a lot of people that really enjoy that show, and that the rug's been pulled out from under us in that regard, and we will not see a continuation, especially considering the cliffhangers and some of the threads, a character thread or two in particular, that was introduced in that last episode. So it's an abrupt cancellation, an alleged abrupt cancellation, because again, Disney hasn't said anything official. There is a change.org petition that has, I want to say, a couple 100,000 signatures at this point, if I'm not mistaken. I know it's into the thousands for sure. It's well past 100,000, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't seen the numbers lately, but there is a petition for a season 2 of Acolyte to happen. Manny Jacinto has talked about it in person, and Amanda Stenberg has posted on it, and of course she has been the victim of a lot of the, you know, the bigotry and the racism and the hatred that, you know, Reva or Moses Ingram, who was Reva in Obi-Wan Kenobi, faced on social media. Kelly Marie Tran, John Boyega, all the same racism and hatred that those actors faced in the past, John, Amanda Stenberg has been facing. Absolutely. No doubt about it. And it's disgusting and it's horrible. And these are wastes of life that have been, you know, posting this shit to her. But that's what the controversy is, John. That's absolutely what it is. And a lot of us feel that Disney kowtowed to the racists and kowtowed to the bigots in terms of canceling the Acolyte going forward because they don't want to piss off that constituency. And I think that there are some that are in those positions of power who are not that far from the likes of Ike Perlmutter or Nelson Peltz, who we know are bigots and have said bigoted things and have made bigoted decisions. I think there are some out there in the Disney purview as far as the executives that do feel that way and probably also feel that strongly about the Acolyte and had no problem giving it a short hook in that regard. So that's where the controversy really comes from in that regard. You can research it further, John, but that's essentially it in a nutshell, to be honest with you. Question 3 that John has in this particular email. He says, Liam and Noel Gallagher are back together for an Oasis tour next year in the UK. Perhaps I should consider doing a work exchange there instead of Japan so I can see them perform. Haha. I don't know if I asked what concerts you've been to, but I remember every single major concert I've been to. Wow, this is a long list. Rolling Stones, Nickelback, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, Weird Al Yankovic, 3 times, or no, twice it looks, or no, 3 times, yeah. Noel Gallagher, Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, twice. Arlo Guthrie, 3 Doors Down, Sun 41, Ringo Starr and his All-Star Band. That was 5 years ago in Oakland. Cheap Truck in Hollywood, or Cheap Trick, pardon me. That's what a bit of a typo there. And Ex-Ambassadors in Pleasanton, California. That is a long list. But yeah, no, if you're asking what major concerts, and that's the question, what major concerts have I been to? None. I don't go to concerts. And it's just, for me, I guess the closest I could say that I've been to major concerts would be like the jazz festival that they have in Detroit. I've been there a few times, and because I listen to, I listen to some big bands and some big music here and there, but I listen to a lot of jazz. I listen to a lot of instrumental music. So honestly, concerts are not my scene, to be honest with you. And I'm not necessarily against going to them, but I'm also not that interested because the artists that are there are not ones that I am like that interested in going to see, to be honest with you. Maybe that'll change, I don't know. But as of right now, no, I don't have anywhere near a list this long of different artists and performers that I've seen at concerts over the years, for sure. All right, next question. Do you know how many famous people you've met? What are some pictures you have? You've seen my pics with Kevin Conroy and Jason David Frank, but I have others. And he sent a screenshot and an attachment of the tip of the iceberg of people he's met. His most prized possession, he said, would probably be all 6 Power Rangers from the 1995 film signing his DVD of the movie. He says some are YouTubers on the list, like Tyrone Magnus, Andre, Black Nerd, Nostalgia Critic, Angry Video Game Nerd. Okay. Some wrestlers like John Cena, Randy Orton, Mick Foley, Honky Tonk Man, Shane Helms, the Bella Twins. He's met some voice actors like Billy West, Dee Magnew, Steve Bloom, Charles Martinet. All right. Richard Hatch from both Battlestar Galacticas, Sylvester McCoy, the Seventh Doctor, Jason Mewes, okay, and Jason Momoa, Ray Fisher, and Stanley as well. He says, admittedly, some pics were too expensive, so I had to occasionally do a fly on the wall just to at least have proof that I met each person. Technically, I've met 4 DCEU actors aside from Cena, Momoa, and Fisher. Henry Winkler, he was the first Atom Smasher. Oh, yeah, that's right. Forgot about that. He is in Black Adam. That's right. He says, yep, shook hands with the Fonz, but couldn't get a picture. He says, James Hong signed my finger. All right. Took a pic of my finger, but sadly that's been lost to time. Trisha Helfer, Kel Mitchell, Lou Ferrigno, the Soup Nazi from Seinfeld, and a slew of other people that he spoke to but never got proof. He says, I always felt bad that my dad met Springsteen in the 80s but never had a camera on him because, of course, this was before smartphones. There's more, but these were just a few examples. And he sent all the pictures, and man, this is a ton of photos. All right, we've got the pictorial proof, the pictorial evidence here. I see the Power Rangers. All right, good deal, man. You know, oh, there's the Stan Lee photo. All right, here's the thing. When I went to Motor City Comic Con earlier this year for the first time in a long time, that was kind of the thing that like struck me. It's like I would have loved to have taken pictures with like Giancarlo Esposito and Gates McFadden and Shatner, of course, was there this year, but it's expensive, and I was unprepared. I was absolutely not prepared to drop any of that money and stand in those lines to take pictures with any of those guys. I just wasn't. And Tom Kenny was there from SpongeBob fame. Like there was a good amount of people there for sure. And yeah, the next time I decide to go to Comic-Con, I'm gonna need a budget. I'm gonna seriously need a budget of exactly how much I'm gonna spend and who I'm gonna take pictures with. I'm gonna have to plan that out in advance because seriously, that's a lot. That is a whole lot. That's very expensive to take a picture with these celebrities here in the here and now at these cons. And just, I don't know. I got to work on that. I got to figure that one out because that's a lot. That is a whole lot, to be honest with you. But good on you, man. I'm glad that you have so many pictures and you have so much actual proof, if you will, that you've met these celebrities. As far as the famous people that I've met, I mentioned Nichelle Nichols that I've met. I've met Keegan Delancey, who is John Delancey's son, had a good conversation with him. John Delancey, of course, is Q from Star Trek The Next Generation. I have met Vaughn Armstrong, who's played like 10 different aliens and a human in different Star Trek shows over the years, to be honest with you. Let's see, who else famous have I met? Well, I tell you what, I've met a decent amount of famous people at my current, like in the last year or so at my current job. Let's see, I have met the Black Ranger. That's right, I met Walter Jones. I met him last year, or it might have been earlier this year, truthfully, that I met him. I met John Hinton, who is a stand-up comedian who is Overton Wakefield Jones from Living Single, a.k.a. the original Friends, because Friends is a Living Single ripoff. I said what I said, and there's proof of this, whatever, for those of you that want to argue that, but, we can talk about that later. Let's see, there's been a decent amount. I've met some athletes. I've met plenty of famous athletes, like former Detroit Lions and Detroit Red Wings. If you're a sports fan, those definitely count in the celebrity pantheon, especially here. If I go through the list, I'm actually going to go through and look at some of the photos, because I have taken photos with a number of these people as I have seen them at my current job. Oh, Martin Kleba. I did meet Martin Kleba because he was the little pirate, like one of the little guys, little pirates in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. He was at Comic-Con as well, and so I got a chance to meet him. Took a really awesome picture with him in a retro Wings jersey, a reverse retro Wings jersey. Let's see, who else have I met? Oh, Chris Webber. That also counts under sports. If people have seen Martin, the TV show Martin, the day that I met Walter Jones was also the day that I met Bruh Man, because he was in town to do like a comedy show. So I've met him. There's been a good handful, I would say, but not anybody huge. Like any of the major massive names. Not that I can think of just yet. I haven't even necessarily. I mean, Nichelle Nichols is probably the biggest one as far as like the big nerd names from like the stuff that we're talking about. That's probably the biggest one, because again, I need a budget. I'm going to need to figure out some type of a budget in order to seriously like take pictures with these people and meet these people at cons, to be honest with you. So I'm going to work on that, truthfully, and maybe see some more of them, down the road over, however many years, like as I go to more conventions, as I go to Motor City, because Motor City is a big one. Right? I mean, a bigger one in terms of like bigger names that do show up to it. So that's cool. And I can only imagine it'll probably stay that way, if not get bigger. So that's cool. He did add a bonus fan encounter, John did. He said 12 years ago, during my break, George Lucas stood next to me in an aisle at a Barnes & Noble. Minutes prior, my supervisor and his second-in-command talked to him, and I just kind of looked at him without him noticing me because he already had fans bugging him for a pic, so I tried not to say anything as he looked stressed and tired, so I didn't want to bother him. You know what? Okay, so first of all, that's awesome. From another sports-related perspective, John, I have an encounter similar to that. Years ago when I used to do sports writing, I was covering a golf tournament called the Buick Open that was in Grand Blanc, Michigan, and when I covered that tournament, Tiger Woods was there that particular year. This is way back when. This is over 20 years ago. This is in 2002. And the year that I was covering that for the local paper that I was writing for, during round 3, which was on that Saturday, Barry Sanders showed up. Barry Sanders, Hall of Fame running back, Detroit Lions, one of the greatest running backs of all time, if not the greatest running back of all time. And it was a similar situation where when people at the tournament found out he was there, they kept coming up to him, and he was very politely declining to sign autographs because he does not do that. But he was extremely polite. He was not, mean about it or crass or anything like that. And there were people that just wanted to shake his hand and meet him. And I actually hung out with him for the last couple of holes of Tiger Woods' run. And then I will never forget, he went and watched Tiger Woods hit drives on the practice range, and he almost hit a bus twice going down Saginaw Street. And Barry Sanders is just in awe of Tiger Woods' incredible talent and his raw power, on the driving range at that time. And I'm standing there like, man, this is a dude that ran and eluded some of the fiercest NFL defenders and Bruce Smith, and LT, and a number of others in NFL history, and he's in awe of Tiger Woods' golf shot. I remember I wrote a story. I wrote an opinion piece about it. A feature piece, I should say, about it, because that was a cool story. But it was kind of the same thing where, I was there in a working capacity, but I didn't necessarily want to bug him. But it was cool because he was there with his 2 sisters and his son, who now plays football. That's how long ago this was. But I remember, like, everyone would call him Mr. Sanders, and, like, his sisters were talking to me like, wow, that Mr. Sanders shit is hilarious because, they just look at him as their brother, right? Like, that's their brother Barry. It is what they don't look at him as Mr. Sanders, but he is so revered, especially in the city of Detroit. Like, he is a massive, massive, like, personality, a massive celebrity locally and regionally speaking here. And diehard NFL fans, definitely massive fans of Barry Sanders over the years. So, yeah, that's the closest that I could say to the George Lucas encounter in that regard, where I didn't want to bug him either, but I did kind of talk to him here and there, from our article, but I definitely didn't want to approach him like a fan. I just told him, who I was and who I was writing for, and we had a good chat, and I wrote my feature piece about that. It's one of my favorite pieces that I've written from many years ago. I have no idea where it is. It's nowhere online. This was that's how long ago this was. Physical media. Like, that article is buried somewhere in physical form in, like, all my personal effects or whatever. But yeah, that'd be like one of the bigger fan encounters that I had for sure. A lot of sports people, a lot of local sports people, I guess, is mainly where I'm at. John also sent a quick email on September 9th that said, R.I.P. James Earl Jones. He said, I actually watched the sequel Coming to America the night before he died, but you know what? He lived to 93, and with diabetes, that's impressive. I don't think I'll make it to 93 unless I do whatever the hell William Shatner or Dick Van Dyke do to look 10 years younger than they are. You know what? Don't forget Mel Brooks. He just turned 98, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't he just have a birthday? I saw that on Threads. Let me corroborate this. Let me make certain that I'm right on this. I'm pretty sure. Did he just have... Yeah, actually, no. He didn't just have a birthday. This happened in June. He turned 98 in June. But yeah, he's still kicking. So yeah, same grouping, right? And never say never. I mean, I know a lot of people figure, they'll never get that far. I hope I do. Seriously, personally, I hope I do. And yeah, we got to find out what fountain of youth William Shatner... I mean, Shatner has gone to space in his 90s. Dick Van Dyke was dancing up on top of a table or a desk or whatever, and I still need to watch Mary Poppins Returns. Why the hell have I not watched that movie? But yeah, definitely. I mean, I hear you. It's one of those with James Earl Jones where it's like, yeah, 93, that's a long life, and that's an illustrious career. And like I talked about how there are so many roles that he encompassed that people remember him from, and it's an incredible body of work of his. But by the same token, it's still sad to think of a world that he's not around in, right? Because he was just one of those presences, that just absolutely enriched the planet with the fact that he was here, right? Still gave you some hope in humanity, to be honest with you, with him being here. But, he gave us so many memories and such an incredible career and such an incredible presence. May he absolutely rest in peace, no doubt about that. And then the last email that John just sent, I think yesterday, he said it was a quick recommendation. He says, if you haven't seen the film That Thing You Do from 1996, it's a must-see, especially if you like that Beatles sound. Fun fact, Tom Hanks directed it and plays a supporting role. I am definitely aware of That Thing You Do, and I've heard it's very good. I have not watched it. It is one that's kind of on the long-term list, if you will. I will watch it at some point, but this is a recommendation clearly under the Beatles purview and whatnot. And I am intrigued from that angle, but I've been intrigued from the movie angle and from the Tom Hanks angle for a minute. So at some point, I shall watch it. Isn't Liv Tyler in that too? I'm almost certain she is, if I'm not mistaken. Now I gotta double check that. Now let's Google That Thing You Do. Let's see. Oh, that's right. Tom Everett Scott, Steve Zahn, Jonathan Sheck, I think. Ethan Embry. Yep. Liv Tyler absolutely is in that movie. So is Charlize Theron, and Rita Wilson, of course, Tom's wife, no doubt. But yeah, it's on the long-term list. Oh wow, this cast is actually pretty loaded. Bryan Cranston, Giovanni Ribisi, Colin Hanks, of course, Kevin Pollak, Bill Cobbs, the late great Bill Cobbs. Wow, Paul Feig is in this. Really, director Paul Feig is in this movie. That's okay. There's a decent amount of people, and then there's some that guys in there. Like, if you Google these people, you'll know who they are once you see them. But like Chris Ellis, Alex Rocco, those are that guys. Clint Howard, now that's a that guy whose name you might know. Clint Howard, Ron Howard's little brother. Tracy Reiner, who I know her from, she was Betty Spaghetti in A League of Their Own. That's right, the A League of Their Own movie the original movie. Mark McClure is in it. Wow, Mark McClure, the Jimmy Olsen from the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve Superman era. All right, how about that? Howie Long, Robert Wisdom. Oh, this is a good cast. This is a really good cast. I mean, 1996, a lot of these people, especially that guys, we didn't know who they were, right? We didn't know who Paul Feig was, right? Had no idea, and we were learning who Liv Tyler was, because this is even 2 years before Armageddon, to be honest with you, right? And certainly before Lord of the Rings or anything else that she's done in that regard. So yeah, cool. Yeah, no, this is definitely on the list. This movie is definitely on the list, not just for the Beatles sound, but certainly for everybody that's in it and for the movie itself. So thank you for that quick recommendation. And of course, as always, John, thank you very much for your feedback. It is indeed greatly appreciated. All right, let's go to Kobe Wilcox next. He sent an email back on August 30th titled Twilight of the Rebel Moon, Sonic Movie 3 Battle, and The Boys. All right. He says, hey, Ray, let me start with my thoughts on the director's cut of Rebel Moon Parts 1 and 2. I'll keep it spoiler-free in case you haven't watched them yet. Yeah, I have not found 6 hours to be able to do that yet, but I will. I will at some point. He said the additional scenes provide a greater context to the story, provide more backstory on a few minor characters, and overall an awesome watch. While on the subject of Zack Snyder, he says, the trailer for Twilight of the Gods released, and it was pretty cool. I'm going to try to binge it when it releases in September. Yeah, I have not seen that trailer, but yeah, that is coming up soon, because they've started doing some more interviews with him. I've seen him talking about it, to be honest with you. He says another trailer that came out recently was for the third Sonic movie, and it looks to be on par with the second film. I have seen that trailer. That it actually does look good. And I have not seen either of the first two films. But he says, not going to lie, I'm a little disappointed that Amy Rose and Rouge the Bat won't show up in the movie given their major roles in the game's narrative, but there's always the opportunity for them to make impressive debuts later down the line without being overshadowed by Shadow. On the plus side, we have Shadow in an awesome obligatory Akira bike slide. Yeah, we all caught that, definitely. You know what? The trailer for the third movie did look good at some point. At some point, I will finally get past all of my feelings, rational or irrational, about that whole bullying thing with respect to Sonic's original look, and I will watch the first two Sonic films. I'll watch the first one, see if I like it. And if I do, then I'll watch the second one, and then maybe I'll be persuaded to watch Knuckles. Perhaps. We'll see how that goes. They're all available in glorious steelbook form, I might add, as well. So that's something to think about as a physical media collector. But continuing, Kobe says, now on to The Boys episode 10, proper preparation and planning. To promote Stormfront as the new member of the Seven, Vought organizes a girl power press interview featuring her, Starlight, and Maeve. But Maeve leaves to see her ex Elena in the hospital, and Stormfront quickly shows she doesn't give a damn about being PR friendly and advises Annie to be more honest with herself, which comes in handy when A-Train recovers from his coma and taunts Annie about her aiding Huey back in the season 1 finale. Fortunately, Annie is able to save herself and even the playing field by revealing that she knows that A-Train is the one who killed his girlfriend Popclaw, which was covered up as an accidental overdose. Ah, yes. During her hospital visit, Maeve reveals why she's been distant with Elena. Homelander is extremely possessive of Maeve, and she didn't want Elena to be another one of his victims. Speaking of which, Homelander spends some time with his son Ryan, which horrifies Becca, as her home is actually an off-the-grid, Vought-gated community meant to keep herself and Ryan hidden from Homelander. The Deep, still ousted by Vought, gets recruited by Eagle the Archer to join the Church of the Collective. Part of the process is having the Deep go on a Fresca-fueled drug trip that results with him accepting his body and singing a duet with his gills, something I found more twisted than the dolphin scene back in Season 1. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. With Butcher back to lead the boys, he says they track down the Soup terrorist from the previous episode in exchange for information on Becca's location, which is revealed to be Kimiko's brother Kenji. Kimiko and Kenji escape from the group and get a chance to reconnect, but Kenji is deeply committed to the Shining Light Liberation Army, the terrorist organization that killed their parents and abducted them when they were young. The current differences lead to a street fight that ends with Kimiko winning the fight and the boys arriving to collect their bounty. Oh, and to top off the episode, Butcher punches Huey, warning him not to get in his way of finding Becca. Overall, cool episode. Stormfront is a nice change of pace from the more image-focused superheroes. More May focus is good to see, and I'm curious to know how Homelander's influence on Ryan will play out. Most likely not great for Ryan. Thank you as always, Ray, and I hope to get back with you with more of The Boys. Yeah, Kobe, to be honest with you, I have to be careful because you're motoring through here, and we've got some time before, I think, the 5th and final season of The Boys releases, and I am behind. To wit, I have like the last 2 episodes of season 3 still to watch. I have all of season 4 to watch, and I have all of Gen V to watch. So, and I want to do a rewatch, to be honest with you. I know you've been recapping, but I want to go back and rewatch those first 3 seasons in their entirety, to be honest with you, and I want to watch Gen V. I want to do this in order before watching The Boys season 4. So I got to find some time to figure out how to do that. I mean, there's so much shit to watch. There really is. But just a heads up. If you somehow get to season 4, or to the end of season 3, rather, before I'm able to catch up, just a fair warning that will be massive spoiler territory for me at that point. Hopefully it won't be by the time we get there, but we will see. We'll see how it goes. You're already well into season 2 at this point, so we'll see exactly how that goes. I got to figure out some time here to watch all of this shit. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I will try. But thank you so much, as always, for your feedback and for your recaps, Kobe. It is greatly appreciated. So next up is Alex De Silva, who, of course, is motoring through Star Trek The Next Generation, but, of course, he offers thoughts on many other things as well, and that is where we begin, per usual. He says, "Hey Ray, some quick sports ball talk, then the geeky stuff." Now, he sent this on Friday, September 6th, so just to throw the date out there in case any of what he's talked about is a little outdated at this point, which could totally be the case with sports. He said, "So the Red Sox have hit a major slump ever since the All-Star break. We were on fire in June and July, but the pitching and hitting have just deteriorated since then. Games are becoming very tough to watch. In the middle of July, it felt like we were well on our way to the World Series, but now we'll be lucky to win the series against the White Sox this weekend. Last time I checked, we were actually tied with Detroit in the race for the last wildcard spot, but my optimism of us making it is much further is dwindling." So, all right. So since this, it's interesting that he points out that they were tied with the Tigers for the last wildcard spot, because lately we've been paying attention to the fact that the Tigers are 2.5 games back of the last wildcard spot, and they're chasing the Minnesota Twins at this point. So let's do an update here. The wildcard standings. So right now, your American League divisional leaders are the Yankees leading the American League East, Cleveland leading the American League Central, and Houston, the Astros, leading the American League West. And your 3 wildcard spots right now are Baltimore, Kansas City, and Minnesota. And right now, the Tigers are 2.5 games back of Minnesota for that last wild card spot, right? And they won today. They actually took 2 or 3 from the Orioles, which is crazy. They took 2 or 3 from the Orioles over the weekend, which included a 1-0 shutout where they actually took a no-hitter into the 9th inning between like a couple different pitchers. It's crazy how the Tigers are playing right now with this piecemeal rotation and stuff that's going on. It's amazing. We actually have a legitimate mathematical shot of making the playoffs. I don't think we're going to, but it depends on how much more we can win and how much more the Twins can lose in that regard. But yeah, Boston is actually 2 games behind us. They're at 75 and 75. Us and Seattle, the Tigers and the Mariners are at 77 and 73. So yeah, right now we're ahead of the Red Sox in the wild card spot. It's interesting how things have changed and how the end of this season is going. Now again, I don't think we're going to make it. I think Minnesota's going to stay just ahead of us, but we'll see how it goes. It's very intriguing. Would not have thought that we would be in a race for the wild card spot at this point in the season. That is crazy, to be honest with you. We'll see how that goes. So, yeah, Alex, you've had some happier moments with the Red Sox, but crazily enough, I may get the last laugh when it comes to the playoffs. We'll see. There's plenty more baseball to be played. The season's hardly over yet, but we'll see how it goes. At any rate, he says in happier news, World Cup qualifying matches start tonight. This would have been a week ago. For anyone who doesn't know, before the actual World Cup, countries all around the world battle it out in qualifying matches to decide who actually gets to make it into the World Cup in 2026. Since the USA, Canada, and Mexico are hosting the next cup, they automatically get a free pass in, but everyone else needs to prove their worth. Brazil will play that night against Ecuador, but history is on our side. Brazil is the only country in the entire world that has never missed a World Cup. Can't wait. All right, World Cup soccer preview. We're looking forward to that. He says, looks like NFL season is kicking off, pun intended. I never really followed it before, but I'm going to give it a try this season. Of course, I'll be rooting for the Patriots. I know. Everyone says I just missed one of the greatest dynasties in American sports history and that the Patriots suck now. To that I say, well, maybe things will be different this season. Well, I'll tell you what. The Patriots did win in week 1, to be honest with you. Here, I'll go ahead and pull that up because obviously being a Lions fan, I follow that. Now, the Lions did not win today. They lost a very winnable game today, unfortunately, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I hate playoff rematches. It's silly. The juice is always with whoever lost the playoff game. And in this case, Tampa Bay lost the game. They did not play that great of a game offensively, but our offensive game was worse. And so we did not win today. However, the Patriots are 1-1 because they did win their first game in week 1, which honestly surprised many of us that they would win. They beat the Bengals. They beat Cincinnati 16-10 in Cincinnati. They lost a tough one today to Seattle, 23-20 in overtime. They probably still should have won that game, but Jacoby Brissett and the Patriots, weirdly enough, that they've shown some heart and they've shown some ability in these first couple of games. We'll see how it goes. Long season ahead. We're only 2 weeks in, but hey, this might not be. The Patriots don't suck just yet. Okay, they're 1-1. They're not winless. They're not undefeated, but they're not winless. They're 1-1 at this point in time. And if you're 1-1, it's pretty much where the NFL kind of has everybody, to be honest with. A lot of teams are 1-1 today. Dallas is 1-1, right? They had a big win in week 1. I forget who they played, but they just got bent over today by the Saints. There's the Niners are 1-1 because Minnesota beat them with Sam Darnold at quarterback. It's crazy. The Packers are 1-1 because they lost to the Eagles in Brazil, funny enough, a week ago, and then beat the Colts today and with a backup quarterback because their starter, Jordan Love, is hurt for the next number of games, to be honest with you. The Steelers with a brand new quarterback, they've beaten the Broncos. They're 2-0. No, the NFL is a great equalizer with respect to that. So I wouldn't say this is a bad time to get into it, to be honest with you, being a Patriots fan. Whether you miss the dynasty or not, the Patriots are going to, at the very least, make some type of noise and give somebody problems. That's usually how the NFL works on any given Sunday. Truthfully, it is built for any given Sunday to actually be a real phrase. On any given Sunday, any team can get beat. Any team can be beat in that regard. So I hear you on that. It'll be very interesting to see how it goes. It says, or Alex rather says, when it comes to impractical jokers, I actually like the fact that the other jokers are constantly giving their commentary while the one joker is out in the field trying to complete his challenges. I would never be able to be on a show like this. I don't know how they can keep a straight face during pranks when they're listening to wheezing laughter in their ears. This goes back to an earlier email where he talked about him being a huge fan of impractical jokers. Fair enough. I got you. Hey, it's all subjective to each their own. He says, I just finished the Chronicles of Narnia for the first time. Funnily enough, the final book, titled The Last Battle, is narrated by none other than Sir Patrick Stewart. Do you have any history or familiarity with the Narnia series? I've only seen the movies that they made, and they did not make all 7. I know it's a 7-book series by C.S. Lewis, but I've only seen the movie, the very first one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then Prince Caspian. That's the extent of it, to be honest with you. I don't really have any other familiarity with the Narnia series in that regard. I've never read them. I've been aware of them my whole life. I've been aware of the book series my whole life, but no, I've never read them, and I have only seen those 2 movies, so I don't have a whole lot of history with that, unfortunately. But continuing on, he says, my wife is currently binge-watching NCIS, which has early seasons on Paramount Plus and later seasons on Netflix. Every time she's watching, I have to chuckle at the constant complaints I hear from her in regards to Paramount Plus's functionality. Ad breaks will just freeze out of nowhere, and then when she exits the episode and goes back into it, it'll play a new ad break and then start the episode from the beginning, ignoring wherever she left off. This gets her livid. Rewinding and fast-forwarding also takes forever. All in all, she can't wait to get through the Paramount Plus seasons of NCIS so that she can transition to Netflix already. In her own words, quote, if I could kill an app, I'd kill Paramount Plus, end quote. Might sound harsh, but Paramount Plus really does need to pour some money into developing their app's user interface. Yeah, they do. I've been saying this from the beginning. Paramount Plus, I love their library. Paramount Plus's library is fantastic. They've got all my Star Trek, all of it. All the movies, all the shows. They have all the Star Trek that I need. They got old Nicktoons, they got Doug, they got Rugrats, they got Our Real Monsters, they got the old Nickelodeon game shows, they got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they got Transformers, they have Frasier. I'm going to be watching season 2 of the Frasier revival when it premieres this week, because I got 3 shows that are premiering this week that I got to watch. I got to watch The Penguin, I got to watch Agatha All Along, which should be called Agatha House of Harkness, but whatever. And I got to watch season 2 of the Frasier revival, like the season premiere of that. All 3 of those are premiering on September 19th. And Paramount Plus's user interface will be the worst out of all of them. Worse than Max, worse than Disney Plus, worse than any of them. It's terrible, awful. But the library is fantastic. So yeah, I don't know who needs to hear this or what needs to go on, but they got to fix that user interface. It is the worst user interface of any app with one of the best libraries. It sucks that all that great content is hidden behind a tortured, destructively stupid user interface. Really hope they fix it. They got to put some money into that. Seriously, call the Pluto people. Pluto TV is Paramount's free ad-supported television app. That has a better interface. And even that interface isn't perfect. Like, it's much better on Apple TV Plus or on mobile devices than it is on your desktop. But even that is better than Paramount Plus's user interface. Seriously, they need to fix that. I totally understand where your wife is coming from. I love the library. I love the everything, the content that is there. Hate the user interface. Terrible. Awful. Continuing on, he says, this time around, I watched 2 big episodes for The Next Generation, the Season 1 finale and the Season 2 premiere. Oh, yes, all right, transitioning, here we go. He says, first up was The Neutral Zone. Yes, that is the Season 1 finale. He said, the start with people in pods reminded me of Khan and his crew, from the original series. Yes, similar premise in that regard. Not Superman, but definitely Frozen from Out of Time. He says, I noticed that Denise Crosby is credited in all episode intros throughout Season 1, even after her character's death. Does this mean she got paid even for episodes she wasn't in? If so, what a sweet gig. Was there a real-world reason why she left the show just a few episodes before the finale? So I'll read this straight from the wiki, Alex, because I've never really done like that big of a deep dive into why she left, because Denise Crosby has been, let's say, involved in Star Trek for a number of years since then. That's all I'll say about that. But it says that initially one of the top billed characters she was, and she was featured prominently in episodes such as The Naked Now and Code of Honor, yes, of course. But it says the role of Tasha gradually moved into the background as other members of the ensemble cast became a greater focus of the series. Crosby reportedly grew disillusioned with her role because of its, quote, Uhura-like status. She said, quote, I was struggling with not being able to do much with the character. I had all these ideas and I couldn't do them. I was just stage dressing, end quote. Ultimately, Crosby decided to leave the show. Her character was killed by the alien creature Armus during the episode Skin of Evil, which you've now seen. She had appeared in 22 episodes when she left. Now, that came from StarTrek.com, a transcript archived from the original article, which I guess was on May 5th, 2008, retrieved September 8th, 2009. So, yeah, that's coming from StarTrek.com as far as the source of her quotation there. But, yeah, I think she just was hoping that she would be more a part of the cast, and they just were pushing her to the back burner. And truthfully, I don't know, like, the way that the cast and crew evolved over the years, I do wonder if she had stuck with it, if that had changed, because, you know, there are a number of characters. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were Data episodes. I forget if there, I don't think there were episodes where Worf and Geordi took the forefront at times, and but I think they tried to balance it out, and there was a smattering of them. And I do wonder, she may have gotten episodes more focused later on if she had stuck with it. But either way, I will just say that her contribution to the franchise is definitely mark-making in that regard. So stay tuned for that. I'll just put it that way without getting into spoiler territory here. He says that Picard's confrontation with Offenhouse was satisfying. Going back to the neutral zone, Picard has this quiet, civilized way of verbally taking someone down that's refreshing to watch. Oh, that only gets better. That only gets better as the show goes on, Alex. So at the end of the episode, he says the Romulans declared their intent to proceed into Federation territory past the neutral zone. This is an act of war, isn't it? Somewhat. There is a reason. Well, here, let me read this last part. You said, overall, this was a pretty weird episode, structurally speaking. It's like the writers had a mandate that they had to set up this future conflict with the Romulans, but couldn't actually do anything with it in this episode, so they included this random side plot with the pod people that didn't really connect at all with the main Romulan storyline. Yeah, there are two things that point to this episode and what happens with the Romulans that are referenced later. That's all I can tell you. The Romulans basically are reintroducing themselves into the conflict, so get ready to see more of them, right? That's a big part of that. And also, the reason for why. Get ready to see what that leads to. You have not run into that yet. You will, coming up in the second season. And they may, if I remember correctly, they'll reference it in that episode. But yeah, there's some big stuff that is connected to that. That, no, they could not do really anything with it in this episode, but they will They most certainly will. Just stay tuned. Don't worry. It's going to get there. But he says, next up was The Child, the season 2 premiere. He says, so Worf and LaForge have moved from wearing red to wearing yellow. Why is this the case? I think I remember you saying something about how red now equals leadership and yellow now equals security and engineering. Yeah, that's essentially what it is. Basically, in the first season, Worf and Geordi are both like low grade, if you will, and so they're like ensigns, essentially. I mean, not ensigns, but like lieutenant junior grade in that regard. In this case, Geordi got promoted to chief engineer. Because remember, they went through a couple of chief engineers, at least one or two, in the first season. Well, now he's chief engineer. He is chief engineer of the Starship Enterprise. So now he is firmly into gold territory, and security is also gold, and that's where Worf has now moved into. So that's what this is. When in the first season, they were just, Geordi was just helmsman, and Worf was just kind of there, right? Like, I mean, he was kind of security, but not officially security, because Tasha Yar was chief of security. Well, now Worf is chief of security, and Geordi is chief engineer. So that's exactly why they've changed their color scheme for the uniforms. And they will wear this going forward. I will say that, to be honest with you. So he says, it's very rare to see anyone wearing blue in this show. There's the medical staff, and that's pretty much it. Occasionally there'll be a guest star in blue, but no one else from the main cast. Sciences. So medical and sciences, those have pretty much remained blue throughout the entirety of the show, going all the way back to the original series. It's the one color that has not changed its designation, right? Because go back to the original series. Spock wore blue because he was a science officer. McCoy wore blue because he was the chief medical officer, right? So did Chapel, right? So anybody with sciences and medical wears blue. It's the same here. Crusher wears blue. And you'll see other science and medical officers wear blue. And Troy, I'll also let you know, also wears blue. That's not so much of a spoiler. But basically, sciences also includes like the psychological, if you will. Psychological, medical, really, to be honest with you. Not sciences, but medical in that regard. And that's certainly where she fits into being the ship's counselor in that regard. So when you see her in an actual uniform, and you will, I think you already have, truthfully, she wears the blue. But he says the whole thing with Deanna's pregnancy was kind of disturbing, to be honest. In straight up terms, she was raped, since there was no hint of consent or desire to be found. Yes, that is technically quite true. It's certainly not the same, it's not presented in the same graphic form as rape and sexual assault. But yeah, it is one of the creepier parts of the show. Yes, definitely. This early TNG, this is part of it, man. I mean, you watch Code of Honor, that was a terribly racist episode, and you've seen some other creepy things happen so far, and yeah, I wish I could tell you that kind of stuff is going to slow down here, but quite honestly, you're only into season 2, so prepare for other things. But yeah, yes, you could certainly say that about Troy in that regard, so because it was completely non-consensual. Yes, it wasn't physical in the same, jarring way that we've seen depicted before, but certainly not consensual, no doubt. He said, I appreciated Picard putting an end to the conversation when Deanna declared she was going to have the baby. Yes, absolutely, because that, in many ways, was creepier. This idea of Worf and Riker arguing over, one, who was the father, and two, what they were going to do with the baby. And it's like, hey, guys, not your decision. Her decision. Okay? I realize that you're concerned about security and you're concerned about this whole alien thing, but it's her womb and her baby, her choice. And Picard, being in the position of leadership as the captain, he understood that. So there you have it. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I agree. He says Pulaski saying Deanna should have someone with a human touch by her side during the birth, and Deanna saying no, she wants Data to stay, was a very sweet moment between the two of them. Yes, indeed. He says Pulaski is an interesting character so far, very different from Dr. Crusher. She's a lot more blunt and straightforward. Was there a real-world reason Dr. Crusher's actress left the show? Well, let's see. For this, I'm going to go to an article from Screen Rant that was updated just last year by Caroline Fox. And we're going to go straight to it here. It says the reason that she wasn't in Season 2 is because the actress, Gates McFadden, was fired by co-executive producer Maurice Hurley. It says production on TNG Season 1 was infamously chaotic, and numerous writers quit the show during its tumultuous first year. As a result, Hurley rose to become TNG's head writer and began to put his stamp on the series as TNG creator Gene Roddenberry stepped back from running TNG day-to-day. One of the targets of Hurley's ire was the character of Beverly Crusher and Gates McFadden, both of whom he disliked. According to Star Trek producer Rick Berman, McFadden was fired because Hurley, quote, had a real bone to pick with Gates. In turn, McFadden didn't care for Hurley either. In a 2018 interview with SBS Australia, McFadden said the following, quote, I had been in conflict with one of the male writer-producers about certain things I thought were sexist. What I've heard is that he said either she goes or I go. I was shocked that they let me go because I knew my character was really popular, but he was going to be writing more and more and didn't want to have to deal with me. What was great was that they got rid of him and asked me to come back, end quote. It says Hurley went directly to Roddenberry and asked to have Gates let go. Berman, for whatever reason, decided not to get involved or prevent McFadden from being fired and replaced by Diana Muldaur as Dr. Pulaski in TNG Season 2, but Hurley himself only lasted one season as TNG showrunner. Rick Berman then took over running Star Trek TNG. After Hurley left at the end of Season 2, Berman asked McFadden to come back as Dr. Pulaski proved unpopular with fans. It says McFadden also believes that some of the producers behind the show may have felt like the show had, quote, too many women, which is such a bullshit reason that I could totally see idiots in the producer ranks coming up with. It said Denise Crosby, who played Security Chief Tasha Yar, had just left the show a few episodes before the end of TNG Season 1 because she felt her character wasn't given enough to do. It seems McFadden, too, wanted to play a more active role as Dr. Crusher, but the early writers just weren't sure what to do with her character. So what we're getting here, Alex, is that the first couple of seasons of TNG, the writers were probably misogynistic and like stuck in yesteryear and just, had no idea how to write women and were, I guess, deathly afraid of it. And thankfully, people like Hurley and others were broomed out, because it says here that after she was let go, Gates McFadden said she received thousands of letters from fans who loved and missed Dr. Crusher. It wasn't just the fans who wanted Dr. Crusher back aboard the Enterprise. Captain Picard himself, that's right, Sir Patrick Stewart, reached out to McFadden asking her to return. In fact, she said that Stewart was the first person to call me and ask if I'd consider it, she said. With Hurley no longer running TNG, and with the blessings of her castmates, McFadden returned as Dr. Crusher in TNG Season 3. McFadden continued as Beverly Crusher throughout the rest of TNG's 7-season run, and returned as Dr. Crusher in the 4 TNG feature films. I realize that technically that could have been a spoiler for you, Alex, but come on now. I think we all know, basically, on from what we've seen in that regard. But yeah, now everything that I just read for you, Alex, with respect to that from the Screen Rant piece, doesn't necessarily give you a ton of hope for what you're now launching into with Season 2. But again, as I said from the beginning, just stick with it. Just hang tough, stick with it. Yeah, Season 2, not a great one. Certainly not a great one. You're going to run into a lot of clunkers. And I promise you, once you get past Season 2, you will run into significantly less clunkers going forward. But yeah, Pulaski was not well received. To be honest with you, in many cases, a lot of us have considered her the female Dr. McCoy, especially, like you say, she's more blunt and straightforward like he was in the original series. And that's not a dynamic that fans really wanted with this show. There's some stuff that she's going to do, and pay attention to her relationship with Data. Like, that's, I think, some of where a lot of the fans' ire came from, where it's like, what is your problem with respect to this, you being in the presence of an android, and why you've always got to do this and say shit like that or whatever. Like, just grin and bear it. We're going to get through Season 2, and we're going to get you to Season 3. Once you get to Season 3, that's when we're going to start seeing some gems from TNG. But just get through it. It's not that there are no gems in TNG. There are some important episodes in Season 2, rather, that is. But, yeah, just hang on there, man. Just keep going with it, for sure. Just got to get through this Season 2. But, yeah, a lot of upheaval in those first couple of seasons of TNG that a lot of people tend to forget was the case, truthfully. But then Alex asks, so Guinan is basically the ship's bartender. Was Goldberg already famous at this point in her career? Yes, she was. She most certainly was. She was doing stand-up. I think by this point she had done Jumpin' Jack Flash. She had done Burglar. She hadn't done Ghost yet, but no, Whoopi Goldberg most certainly was famous at this point. I think she was just about to do Comic Relief, the big comedy trio, like the fundraising thing with her and Billy Crystal and the late, great Robin Williams. But no, Whoopi Goldberg absolutely was famous at this point. There's no doubt, yes. And yes, this is her first appearance, and this is her arrival onto the show and as a part of this cast, if you will. No doubt about it. But yes, definitely. He says Wheaton was playing Wesley as much more subdued than normal in this episode. He definitely felt older than he did before. Yes, absolutely. Wesley's character does age and grow over time, and certainly is less of of a kid, if you will, going forward from this point on, to be honest with you. And certainly towards the latter part of the season, certainly into the third season, absolutely, no doubt about it. He matures, still younger, but definitely matures from how you saw him in season 1, for sure. He says, next episode is Where Silence Has Lease, Live Long and Prosper, Alex. Where Silence Has Lease. All right. Very curious to see what your thoughts are on that particular episode. But yeah, you have started season 2, and like I said, it is a bit of a slog, Alex, but don't worry. We'll get through it. It's going to be awesome. There's going to be a couple of gems here and there, but it wouldn't surprise me if, you're not all that enthralled with a good deal of this season, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes, to be honest with you. You've already heard some of the behind-the-scenes strife that was going on, if you will, so just bear that in mind as we go through that. Star Trek, historically speaking, has had a history of the first couple of seasons not being all that great, and shows finding their stride. TNG found its stride in season 3. I would say the same for DS9. I might even say the same for Voyager, to be honest with you. And truthfully, even though I enjoyed all 5 seasons of Star Trek Discovery, I would also say the same for that show, is it really did find its own stride and its own tone and setting in season 3. Even though I did enjoy the first 2 seasons, it found its own place in season 3 going forward. So this is a Star Trek thing that certainly happens, to be honest with you. But looking forward to the rest of your watch updates, good sir. Thank you, as always, for the feedback. All right, and we'll close this week's episode of Flight Chat by turning to Stuart Little, who sent in an email a couple of days ago titled Rebel Outlaw Juice. Oh, that's a mashup. Let's see. I think we can deduce from all 3 of those words exactly what he's going to be talking about here. But he says, hello, back again to give thoughts on a few things I've consumed lately entertainment-wise. First is Rebel Ridge, Netflix's new action thriller starring Aaron Pierre and Don Johnson. For people who don't know who Aaron Pierre is, he was Dev, if I'm not mistaken, in Krypton. Pour one out for Krypton. He's been in a number of other things as well. That's the biggest thing that I remember him from. He was awesome. Love Krypton. That show. Anyway, he says, Pierre plays an ex-Marine going to small town to pay his cousin's bail. When he's waylaid by police, by local police that is, who confiscate the bail money under the pretense of civil forfeiture on suspicion of it being connected to crime. This is obviously BS, and with it being urgent, he gets his cousin out of jail. He doesn't let it go and tries formal measures to get the money back, but comes into conflict with the local police chief played by Johnson. Things escalate. It's a great blend of constantly building tension for the first third, nice clash of personalities and action sequences that are really immersive and real, but still heightened feeling. Pierre plays his character Terry Richmond with a great sense of restraint and tactical awareness, something that's made logical when you find out more about his background, while he also clearly isn't above the high emotional stakes of what's going on. Pierre, he says, who you may remember from Krypton where he played Dev M, yes, indeed, is getting pushed as a great pick for Jon Stewart by some DC fans, and that definitely fits based on this performance. But overall, this is a tight, lean movie that makes the most of everything it has. Aaron Pierre as Jon Stewart, yeah, why not? Why the hell not? That would be a great legacy casting, right? And to salvage an actor from Krypton and bring him in to the DCU, yeah, I have no issue for that. I have no issues with that whatsoever. Better than some of the other surface level choices that people have come up with over the years for Jon Stewart. I have no issues with that. It'd be great. All right, but Rebel Ridge, Netflix movie. Okay, remember that. Secondly, is the open world video game Star Wars Outlaws, Stu says, the latest entry in the canon from Ubisoft. He says because it's from Ubisoft and because it's a bit 7 out of 10 in some gameplay aspects, it's a title that I feel is getting hugely and unfairly dumped on by the internet right now. Because I really enjoyed my time with it, he says, and seeing the criminal underworld of the Star Wars universe and a fun story that takes you to some cool corners of the galaxy and weaves a lot of fun characters and tidbits of the universe together. Starting on Canto Bight, you play fledgling scoundrel Kay Vess, who has to flee the planet after a job goes wrong, and gets caught up in a story involving various crime cartels, the rebels, the Empire, and the biggest heist ever. Kay is a fun protagonist, being in over her head and having to learn the ropes to be a player in this world, with a great supporting cast, including her pet sidekick Nyx, voiced by D. Bradley Baker, who it seems at this point will either play exclusively clones or non-verbal non-humans like Eagly the Eagle and Peacemaker and Murph from Star Trek Prodigy. He's in Star Trek Prodigy? All right, how about that? And later, a reprogrammed separatist commando droid called ND-1 as backup as she builds a crew across various stunning locations, including Poe Dameron's homeworld from Rise of Skywalker, Kijimi, a jungle planet with some Clone Wars history called Akiva, and of course, Tatooine. Stu says there's a great breadth of stuff it draws on from all eras of Star Wars, in fact. Original trilogy, prequel, sequel, and even a little bit of High Republic. Lots of Easter eggs and connections to find, recognizable faces, and things that are codas or preludes to established events. As examples, you can visit the ruined Lars homestead on Tatooine, and one optional mission has a very definite connection to what the eventual status quo is in the Book of Boba Fett. Being set after Empire Strikes Back, Jabba's palace also features an optional conversation Kay can have concerning a certain piece of decoration on his throne room wall. Really? Oh, that would be cool. Okay. He says while the game has plenty of action in the open world and various set pieces, there's a lot of stealth involved with the main missions, which I think is what some are down on, as they expected more of a one-to-one with GTA-style action, even though this fits the story and character. You're not playing as a Jedi. You're a crafty and resourceful rogue on your own, so it wouldn't make sense for Kay to go the direct violence route as a first option all the time. You also have 4 different criminal factions to do missions for, and the game has a reputation system where you can gain favor, e.g. unlocking gear and access to their districts, by doing jobs and making certain choices, but that could also lessen your approval from other groups in the process. It's a good way to put some weight to some mission types that may be a bit repetitive in nature. Overall, I don't regret buying the game at launch, especially since I got a cool steelbook to go with it for no extra cost, and at most, I'd suggest people who are interested but wary could at least wait for a lower price, especially if, like me, you like Star Wars and wanted to see this underbelly of the universe get fleshed out more. I will tell you that the only thing out of that entire paragraph that you said, Stu, that gives me a little bit of pause is the stealth aspect. And not that I wouldn't drag the game as a result of that. It's not that. It's just I'm not great at stealth. That's all. So I'm one of those people that, like, if I can do a particular mission the stealthy way or the blunt instrument way, I choose the blunt instrument way because it's just easier in that regard. But it's not like I can't adapt to stealth. I mean, I do play Assassin's Creed. There's a decent amount of stealth in Assassin's Creed for sure. So I would adapt and adjust to it for sure, I think. But yeah, that would be the only thing that is a hang up. But no, I do want to play this game at some point. I most certainly do, especially now that you just said there's a steelbook. It's probably going to be, well, I don't know, depending on, maybe this might be a case where because it's getting dumped on, maybe the steelbook won't be quite as expensive to find, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I'll check on that here in a little bit, see what the listings for it are, to be honest with you. But yeah, I am definitely interested in this game, and knowing when it takes place and what you talked about with respect to Jabba's wall decoration, that definitely intrigues me for sure. A lot of the lore connections like that certainly intrigue me, and the fact that it's open world sandbox, that's my wheelhouse. I love that shit, truthfully. That's like my favorite style of game to play for consoles, honestly. But finally, Stu says he saw Beetlejuice, and he said, I thought it was a really good example of a legacy sequel. It has that pacey, chaotic energy of the original, with Keaton, Ryder, and O'Hara being wonderful in their returns, with Ortega and a few other nice players being nice additions, Jenna Ortega, that is. Willem Dafoe's character and the subplot he was attached to may have felt a bit thin, but it's always fun to see him committing to something heightened like that in a movie, and Monica Bellucci's character had a great creepy visual design, and Beetlejuice wasn't ruined by having his origin touched on. No, he wasn't. In fact, it was rather hilarious, to be honest with you. Also, I felt it refreshingly pushed things for a PG-13 movie in some places. There was a bit of goriness and some freaky horror stuff. Yes, there was. Yes, there was. The movie was actually happy to be weird and grotesque, and that made it worthy of its predecessor and not feel like a watered-down cash grab. I would watch a third one, which they don't particularly rule out with how this one ends. That is true. A third one could happen, especially if it continues to make money like it has so far been making over its last 2 weekends. He says, that's all for this week. I'll probably chime in with Penguin thoughts during its run at some point, so until then, take care, Stu. Yes, thank you for mentioning that, Stu, because I do want to point out that, yes, there will definitely be some Penguin talk. But in addition to perhaps talking about it on Flightbox here, I will also be talking about it over at Squadcast Media with Scott for DCTV Squadcast. We are going to talk about the Penguin. We're going to do it episode by episode, like we used to do back in the day for all the DCCW stuff, like for Watchmen and Krypton and the others. We're going to do that. We most certainly are going to do that. It's 8 episodes. We're going to dive right into it, starting with this new one coming up this week end of this week, we've got it. So get ready for some Penguin talk. We're going to be hot and heavy with it. Like I said here, probably talking about it on Flightbox as well, but also me and Scott talking about it over at squadcastmedia.com over on DCTV Squadcast for sure. So stay tuned for that. Going to be a whole lot of fun, I can imagine, for sure. But thank you, as always, for the feedback, Stu. Indeed, greatly appreciate it. I'm going to go search for my copy of Star Wars Outlaws Steelbook very shortly. But before I do that, I will sign off here and say that will do it for this particular episode of Flight Chat. Thank you so much to everyone that sent in feedback this week. Thank you to John for all the emails that you sent. Thank you to Kobe Wilcox for your updates on the boys and your thoughts as well. Thank you to Alex and all of your thoughts and updates. We'll see what happens with that wildcard race and as you continue to go through Season 2 of Star Trek TNG. And thank you, Stu Little, for your thoughts on Rebel Ridge, Star Wars Outlaws, and Beetlejuice indeed. And looking forward to some talk on the Penguin. Thank you to everyone who sent in feedback again. And for those of you who wish to send in feedback and become part of the feedback circle here at the Flight Chat, you know where to find me on Threads at the Flightcast, on Instagram at the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.